Teacher Survivalist Professional Development, Module 4. Classroom Design, a systematic structure to create independent learners. I'm not touching you. 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 Poke, 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 poke. Imagine that for 8 hours of a day, every single day, as a teacher. That's what it feels like. Students going, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I go here? Can I go there? Why not? Please, give me this. He's touching me. All the nagging effects of teaching lead to an end-of-day stress buildup. In Module 4, you'll be setting systems in your classroom to essentially get students to stop talking to you. Yes, I actually do mean that. Yes, we want to interact with our students. Yes, we love them dearly, but their everyday small questions that they know the answers to or that they can find the answers to very easily are driving you mad. So we're looking to systematize it. And the goal of Module 4 is to build you up into a teacher who is not getting poked and annoyed daily by creating confident students and independent learners. Through this systematic approach, you will introduce students to classroom procedures so that they have a clear understanding and do not need to ask you whether or not they can use the bathroom, where to find a pencil, or what they do in case of a fire drill. You've hit a goldmine with Module 4 because in addition to learning how to systematize it, you'll be provided with 4 bonus resources to enhance your classroom. These resources include my daily lineup sign, my cell phone policy, my class pass, and my respect rules. In the companion resource for Module 4, you'll be evaluating these bonus resources and seeing how you can adapt them to your own classroom.
You don't need to try so hard. Realize you're right where you need to be. You had it from the very start.
Systematizing your classroom. So when we talk about systematizing your classroom, that's really what we're going to focus on this week. And it's a way to take all the frustration, not all, but to reduce the frustration in your classroom by creating independent systems for independent learners. So great big picture here. And then next week, on the second part of this 2-part opera series, we'll learn how to kind of systematize your life. And if you're wondering, maybe you're not a teacher and you're like, hey, is this really for me? The answer is yes. The whole kind of way to figure this out for you is, what are the things that are annoying me the most? So in my classroom, what I say is, I only want my students to bother me with questions that matter, which is kind of crazy because we're always taught, there's no dumb question. There's no bad response. Well, I need a pencil is a dumb question or a dumb statement. Or can I use the bathroom for a high school student? Good grief. So anyway, it's a way to create systems that basically make the students independent of you, the teacher. And the way I always explained it in my class is that's the goal for you. Independence, right? Some of you will go to college. Some of you will go into industry. Who knows? Some of you will live with your parents for the next 30 years. But in theory, when you go, let's just say to college, you're going to have to be independent. If you need to use the restroom, you just go. But these are little tiny questions. I used to tell my students in my class, it's like you remember, well, I have a brother, and they would just like poke you over and over and over and over and over again. You can't see me right now, but I'm poking the air. And they would just drive you nuts by poking. That's what it feels like in the classroom. So by the end of the school day, if I actually charted my interactions with students and kind of categorized them into learning questions or higher level thinking questions or student engagement responses, and also just stuff. Can I use the bathroom? My stomach hurts. I need to talk to my administrator. I don't have a pencil. Where are the markers? Where's the glue? Where do we go during a fire drill? All of these things. what I was finding is by the end of my day, I was so freaking fatigued, and these kids were just poking me all day, that by the time I got to fourth period, it was hard for me to have niceness left. It was hard to be compassionate and be kind and respond in a way that wasn't sarcastic. That's a whole nother episode. Or just like rude or any of that kind of stuff. So in previous episodes, and I encourage you to go back and listen to those, I talked about kind of the classroom management journey and going out and kind of deciding that I needed to take back control of my classroom. This is a little bit of a part of that. But what I did was just kind of identified what is bothering me the most in my class. Like what little remarks, questions, curiosities, what things that the kids are engaging with me the most are really unnecessary. Like, we're needed all day, and then you go home from work and you're needed more. So what can I remove? What do I not need to be needed for anymore that these students actually think they need me for? It's a big concept. So anyway, today's episode is all about identifying those key areas of your classroom and coming up with systems. What I refer to as a system is any kind of, it can be lots of things. It can be like a chart. It can be an area in the room. It can be a sign. It can be whatever. But it just clearly outlines kind of like the directions on how to do something. And it allows the students, once they've learned it and understand it, to be able to do it anytime they want without having to talk to you. Nothing. Like when I used to teach my students kind of my restroom class policy, I would say, you don't need me. Don't talk to me. Don't raise your hand. Don't even just point to the door. You don't need me at all. You get up, you follow the procedures, you walk out the door. That's the end. You come back in 5 minutes was my rule. But that's it. And it was so nice just to watch these students, because you can tell some of them don't even get that independence at home. Good grief. But they could just get up, they could go about their business, they could come back, and it ended up creating a whole, really a deeper level of respect and trust in my classroom. It was great. So think about that as we work our way through identifying your personal classroom systems today, and as I share with you some of mine. So just to review a little bit, some of the, areas that you may be thinking about for systematizing your classroom with are things like the restroom we talked about, the rules. Student supplies used to be like a really big annoyance in my class because we did lots of activities and required lots of materials and supplies. Coming and going from the classroom, fire drills, earthquake drills, any of that kind of stuff. Substitutes, what to do when a substitute was there. Even aside from the kids, this is something a little different. We've been talking mostly about how the student interactions can really wear you down. Something that was just part of the job that I could identify and create a system for was contacting and responding to parents. Any way to efficiently go about that system was going to be a big win for me. All right. So when we talk about a system, it is creating a structure, and then there's going to be a little bit of upfront cost, but then there's going to be an entire school year of reward. All right. So at the end of today's episode, what I want you to do is be able to identify. So, take your pen, put it to paper, start identifying what is nagging you about teaching, and how can you create a structure to reduce that nagging, to reduce that poking. I know when I say poking, you can literally feel it. You guys all know, especially if you have a brother. My brother used to just he would either poke me or he would do that thing where it's I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. And his finger was 1 inch from my eyeball. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. Anyway, that's how it feels at the end of a long work day. Maybe it's your 7th period if you're in a traditional schedule. Maybe it's your 4th period if you're in a block schedule. Maybe you're on 5 or 6 periods. I don't know. Whatever your situation is. So that's kind of where we're going. If we take a minute and start to identify some of these systems. So we'll start with a really easy one and kind of work our way up. The, like, in case of an emergency system I've created. We're going to talk about my class rules system that I created. We're going to talk about the pass to leave the class systems that I created. Note, I didn't say restroom. It's a class pass. It covers all things. And also my cell phone policy, because Lord, y'all, oh my gosh, you guys know, don't you? You know about cell phone life in the classroom. And boy, I've taught long enough. I mean, when I first started teaching, believe it or not, I was teaching on a projector, and we had, projector and magazines and lots of cutout activities that way. And then eventually cell phones became huge for my students, and boy, did that change my world and my discipline. So the cell phone policy helped out quite a bit. So let's start with the first one. It's just called the lineup sign. And so for this one, my goal, because in my classes, we would go outside a lot. And so I remember I had this teacher friend, actually kind of a mentor, and the class that I'm speaking of, it's called sports nutrition. And there was a fitness component where we would go outside and we would do these fitness day activities that I put a lot of work into and I was real excited about. But then other PE classes and all these things, distractions basically, would be outside as well. And I remember my first year of teaching, she said to me, "Oh no, you just need to tell them we don't play well with others." I said, "What?" She said, No, we don't play well with others. So even though there's all these other classes, I mean, my school building was about 2,400 students. She said, we don't play well with others. And so she created this whole kind of mantra and buy-in from her students, actually, where they believed that we don't play well with the others. And I took it one step further, and I told my students, we are the example, we are not the exception. So regardless of what you see everywhere else and how people are acting, we will always set the example. We will not be the exception to the rules. There's always that one person that's like, yeah, but I have a note, or yeah, but I have this excuse, or yeah, but I have that excuse. I don't care. We are the example. We're going to hold ourselves to a higher esteem. We are not the exception to the rules. And think for a second. In your teaching, how can your content area back that up? The more you relate it back, the more those kids are going to take hold of what you're saying. So for me, I was teaching foods and nutrition year in, year out. We learn all about etiquette. So I would just always reference it back to that unit. You know, there are certain social standards. There are certain ways that we should behave in various situations. You represent me. You in turn represent yourself. You represent the school. We are the example. We are not the exception. And so every class I taught knew that. The Common Ground Gay Straight Alliance I used to assist with knew that. The Family and Consumer Science FCCLA Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America organization I ran knew that. My soccer players knew that. Period. Which also helped them understand that if they step out of line, they're done. Wow, you should have seen me. I was like flailing during that explanation. I get real passionate about that. I really do. I get so passionate. I mean, if you think to some of the activities and things that you're doing with your students, I mean, you want them to be the example. I would take students to national conventions in other states. We would go and play soccer matches in other areas of the state. We would do all these things. And I always wanted another team or another group of people to look over and say, oh, that must be Coyle Smith's group. Because they recognize how they hold themselves. You know, I talked a lot there for a minute, but all this resource is it's a front and a back sign that you print off, and then you basically tape it to an old broomstick or whatever it is. Because in our school, there was so many students that when we would do a fire drill and have to go outside or whatever, it always was like a way for them to find you. They knew what your broomstick was. And so for me, it was this sign. So on the front, it says, "We are the example. We are not the exception." And to help like substitutes and things like that, whenever they were in my class, I labeled it, and it says fire drill, outside play, lining up, whatever it might be. And I don't care how cheesy it is. You know, if you believe it and if you sell it, they buy into it. And in my classroom, I was always very big on building confidence with those students in any way I could. I was huge on that. I still am huge on that. So at the bottom of the sign, big yellow sign with an exclamation point on it, it says, "Hazard. This area contains dangerously smart students. Symptoms may be contagious." I know. I don't care. I love it. I don't care. I love it. It's a little cheesy, but I love it. And on the other side, it just said, "Warning, we do not play well with others." So all the things that I wanted to get across on there. And that helped out a lot. It really, especially for substitutes, you know, I knew that if I was going to be out on a day that we had some type of a drill, my students knew exactly what to do. And they would be the example out in the middle of the field waiting for whatever was next. So that's a pretty great resource. The next one, the next system, I could talk all day about this one. I'm just going to kind of introduce it to you. But the next part was my rules, my classroom rules. And the short of it was this. My very first year of teaching, I brought in a huge mirror. My dad found it on the side of the road. And I cut out letters and I put the word respect in big, huge letters on it. That part's kind of generic. We all want to be respected. Respect is the rules, etc., etc., etc. So I went ahead and wrote respect on the mirror. And then what I did with it is what changed the classroom environment. So let me give you the quick rundown. My rules in my class were all represented in that mirror. And so I freaking loved it. Awesome idea. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do this in your classroom. If you are allowed to have a mirror in your classroom, get it and do this. It comes in handy for a few different reasons. But on the mirror was the word respect. My 3 rules, this is the quick of it, were respect yourself, respect other people, and respect the room. And the idea was that when you looked in the reflection of that mirror, you could see all 3 of those things, which means it's a constant reminder to respect yourself, other people, and the classroom. The other thing is kids in high school are kind of narcissistic, right? So they loved standing in front of that mirror all the time before they left or right when they came in. And I would always use it as a reminder, like, "Hey, you loved yourself today?" No, I would just say, like, give yourself a compliment while you're there or something like that, kind of just offhanded. But it was also a reminder because they saw the word respect flashed right back at them. They can't get away from it. And then the last little part of that was it became my classroom contract. So as my students would learn about the rules and I talked about it and all that, and I made them agree. Well, I didn't make them. I offered them the option to agree to my rules. Then they would sign the mirror with like an expo marker. And so from there, throughout the entire school year, I would sign it too. Whenever they stepped off, and for me, even calling another student stupid or disrespecting somebody in a non-offensive way, so one of the more minor offenses, all I would do, I wouldn't even say anything. I would just give them my dad eyes and I would point to the mirror. And they knew that that was their cue to get themselves back in check and often, in some cases, apologize to the person they were talking to. Very effective. But having that constant visual, because think about it. Take a step back. After the first week of school, when are students looking at your rules again? Mine looked at them every single day. So think about it. And if I had a big to-do with a parent or with administration, I would request that that meeting be in my classroom so I could point to that mirror and so I could point to that signature that that student had written on it, and we could then go from there. Great, great option. The other 2 systems that I'm going to focus on today is my ClassPass and also the cell phone policy. So the ClassPass situation is anytime a child wants to leave your room and they have to raise their hand, Depending on your school, they have to sign one of their passes. They have to go, they have to come back. It's like a whole messy thing. Sometimes you got to fuss at them because they took too long, all this kind of stuff. And I do want to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm speaking from a high school level. Yes, what I'm saying could probably be applied to middle school years as well, but I am primarily talking high school. So you can adapt this kind of down, pare it down or back a little bit for elementary, especially those first two systems I talked about. The class pass requires a bit more independence, so this is going to be more geared towards those upper level grades. And there are specific criteria to follow, and with all of these systems, there's a whole set of guidelines to add to it and enrich it or make it more specific. But the gist of it is this: whiteboard, little small whiteboard next to your door. Okay? And what I would do, or what I'd suggest you do, is I decide how many times do I want children to leave my room. And I actually got less and less as I did this. It used to be like 4. I eventually narrowed it down to 3. And then when we dropped off block and went to traditional schedule, it only became 2. Because they were changing classes so much through the day, only 2 students could leave my room. But you can do it up to 4, whatever's convenient. And I go ahead and I break that time up into sections. So when a student comes to your class, you don't want them to leave immediately, because the next annoyance you get is, what did I miss? What do we do? No. We're not messing with all that stuff. So instead, I don't let anybody leave for the first 15 minutes of class. I don't let anybody leave the last 15 minutes. And they'll give you all the excuses, and I just remind them they always have a choice to be tardy. By all means, go for it. But that's not an option for me. So anyway, not the beginning, not the end. And so then you just kind of like space out your times. And then the students, when they're ready, they can just kind of like sign up. They sign themselves out. On the little sign out sheet, they have to say where they're going. And then the rule is 5 minutes or less. Okay, 5 minutes or less. If it's more than 5 minutes, you need to talk to me prior to leaving. That's when you're allowed to bother me. That's when you're allowed to annoy me. Something like that. And then if they go one day, they can't go the next. So what we start to see here, without going into all the details of the classroom pass policy, what we start to see here is there's very specific guidelines. I also attach the guidelines right next to the pass when they leave every day, so they can kind of read them if they don't remember. And it allows them to know their limits. So talked about saying no. We talked about saying no with limits, and this gives you the opportunity to let the kids tell themselves yes or no. Instead of them constantly having to ask me and be mad at me, it gives them that option. And one of the little like switches I do, and I love to do this, I do this all the time. If I can put it back on them and they can engage with each other and take me out of it, then it kind of avoids an argument. But let's say that a student comes in, as soon as they enter the room, they sign up for the pass. So I might have students enter, 3 kids sign up, that's it. They are always welcome to negotiate with the other kids who have already signed up to see if they can use their pass. So rather than them coming to me and saying, oh my gosh, but I have to go and Jack already signed up, blah, 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 blah. No, you handle that with Jack. Just like I tell my children, 4 and 5, this sounds like a problem that you guys can handle on your own. It doesn't need me. So we're trying to take you out of the equation and really build their communication with each other and their rapport as a class. This all builds into the whole class trust system. And so the class pass is an excellent, excellent resource. And you can kind of adapt this to fit within the realm of your school's policy also. You can still make what I'm offering to you work within your school's limits. Okay? All right, the last one. Drum roll, please. It is the dreaded cell phone policy. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, cell phones. So if you're starting to notice a pattern here, the goal is to take the teacher out of it. And so when it comes to phones in my room, I don't touch them. I don't really even have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. It's very just like calm. The calmness is beautiful. It's simple. It's easy, and it does require consistency. You have to be consistent. All of these will require consistency. So you just really have to like have that confidence in what you're saying and sell it and believe it. But anyway, the short of the cell phone policy, and this comes with a whole bunch of like explanations, directions. It even comes with like a supply list listed on it. But basically, there's an area in the room. I like to put it next to the door. It needs to be away from the students. So wherever that's going to be. And you just get one of those little shoe organizers, over the door shoe organizers. I'm sure you've seen other teachers do this. That's very normal when it comes to devices. Hang it up on the wall. And then I put a huge power strip right next to it. This is where you got to start to finesse some things and figure it out. But I put a big old power strip right next to it. And I include one of those, like, I don't know, 8 jack USB attachments. So there's 2 of those that I plug into my my power strip. And I even have cords. I have iPhone cords and I have whatever the other ones are. I guess Android. And I do like secure them and zip tie them and tape them in a way that the kids can't just steal them from me. And so I think I include like 5 of each. And for the little pockets up there, there's only like 8 pockets. So the rule is this: you can charge your phone anytime you want in my class, because they always need a freaking charger. So if you need to charge your phone, go for it. I have the space for you. Live it up. Enjoy. However, if you put your phone in the front of the room, you cannot touch it until the last 5 minutes when I let you get up to get it. You make the choice. So charge it anytime you want, but you can't touch it until the end. The second part of that is, that's the punishment. Yeah, I know. It's a pretty good deal. So the punishment to my students, so if I had a student that was on their phone and they're not supposed to be or whatever, I would usually just kind of like tap on their desk and point to the wall where the cell phone stuff was. And so for my students that would get caught or in trouble for being on their phone, I would punish them, air quotes, punish them by making them charge their phone. And then those other rules kick in. Can't get it until the last 5 minutes. Now, if they didn't want to do that, because they always have a choice, that's fine. The way our school used it was you just send them to the office or you call an administrator, whatever, your school's policy is. But for us, it was they just either followed the directions or they didn't. Like, really what I would do is I'd give them the option and I would tell them straight up, I'm not arguing with you. I'm not here to like have a conversation. This is the way it's done. Sometimes they would say, my phone doesn't need to be charged. That's fine. You still got to stick it in a pocket until the last 5 minutes. And it's their job to get up and do it. I don't touch it or anything like that. And so it really creates this nice hands-off approach. And the kids in the class will eventually do this for you. They will eventually police it for you. Because they don't like if John has had to put his phone up 3 times and now suddenly, I don't know, Naraya over here doesn't have to put it up. So they will kind of police it. So that's why your consistency is so important. But creating these punishments that are built in like rewards almost has been really effective. It cost me a little bit of money up front, and I did have to buy some supplies for this. Don't get me wrong. But Goodwill, things like that, I can get them at. But it really created a much better classroom environment for me. It made it so much easier. I never touched a student's phone. I never had to argue with a parent about the cell phones anymore. The administration loved the policy and understood it, because if I had an observer from the district come in, they could clearly see it, because again, I just put those guidelines right next to it on the wall. So it's really just like working within the parameters of an existing system to make it yours. So if you went through now and we just like tallied up our day like I told you to do in the beginning, and I thought of all the times I had to interact with students about a cell phone, and I'm talking prior to these systems. So every time I had to tell a student to put his phone away or her phone away or whatever, every time I had a student ask me, can I go to the restroom? Can I go to guidance? I need to see my administrator. My mom dropped off money. Can I go to the office? Every time I had a kid step out of line and throw something across the room or tell some kid he's being an idiot or any of that kind of stuff. And every time I had to like explain procedures to go outside, I mean, that is one day. Oh my gosh, that is one day full. And like I said, that hasn't even covered student supplies and these other systems that I have created. These are just the 4 basic ones right now. But it's like taking this massive, stressful, annoying weight off your back and setting it to the side. It's almost like if we put your day in a percentage, by setting up these systems, you are removing 40% of the bull and getting rid of it permanently. And because this was so important to me and because it was so effective and my students knew it, I tested them on it. They took notes on all of these systems. We reviewed like we would for a traditional test at the beginning of the year, which helps with them learning my expectations on how we take tests. And they were tested on it to prove that they understood all of this. So it's a whole kind of like world of creating a better, more healthy classroom that establishes independence, builds trust, encourages relationships, and maintains a more positive environment without all the negativity that can come along with a lot of these interactions.